Hi everyone, I'm just sharing this about the badger cull vets accuse ministers of barefaced lies, and basically Dr Ian McGill, a veterinary surgeon and director of Crown Interest Group, has told the BBC that DEFRA's figures are false actually. He says the calculations are unclear and deliberately opaque, and indeed the current situation in the cull zone says there is an increased prevalence. So actually the true data shows that TB is increased where badgers have been culled. So that would suggest that there's another reason for cattle getting bovine TB, not badgers. So either the figures were calculated on an extremely inaccurate basis and they've got it very badly wrong, or they've actually gerrymandered those figures to make it look as if the incidence is falling, when the evidence clearly shows that the prevalence has gone up and the badger cull has not worked. They are issuing barefaced lies in this matter. And as I say, many people who've looked at the evidence, looked at the science behind this justification for a cull, have not accepted it, as you know, it's been very vague all along, and badgers are a rare and protected species in Britain, and so it's very disturbing that there's been this cull going on and badger sets are being destroyed and all the badgers killed, and it is a horrible sight to witness, as I know myself walking on open countryside around Derbyshire where cattle are roaming as well, sheep and cattle, and I found a badger set and every single badger had been shot, adults and babies, and they were just all strewn around the burrow, and it was just awful to witness. It was like looking at a crime scene, and it did disturb me that nobody had even bothered to remove the bodies. They were just left there, and it was a terrible thing to witness. So, you know, it really touched me, and I made inquiries about it, and it was like, well, you know, it's farmland, cattle are on that land, and the badgers are giving TB, bovine TB, to the cattle. And that's when I went to look into more research about this, because it seemed very strange that suddenly badgers are such a threat to the cattle in Britain that farmers have been, you know, farming cattle for generation upon generation upon generation, and there's no mention really, when you look at the history of farming, that badgers are a serious threat, you know. So looking at this is the RSPCA, badgers and the law. So badgers are protected, and so are their sets, and there's all kinds of problems with this to corporate developers, you know, you builders, road work engineers, you name it. Badgers pose a problem to them, you know, because they can't do a road here or there because there's badger sets in that area. A farmer can't develop this part of his land because there's badger sets in that area. So, you know, if, say, for example, there's a farm with a lot of cattle and things on it, there's badger sets, there's if there's badger sets on that land, and the corporate developers have their sights on that land, because, you know, they do plan years and years ahead, and it's like, well, there's badger sets on here, so, you know, it can never really be sold, or have houses built on it and things. But if we get rid of these badger sets, it does become a viable option for the future. And then to make a big fuss about how badgers are giving TB to cattle. So there is a method in their madness. And then we've got this report here from the Guardian, George Monbiot, And sorry, I've got a, a distressed cat here for some reason. So, um, George Monbiot here in this article is explaining about what's going to happen to Britain's wildlife, because Brexit does mean that if we do leave the EU completely, then Britain no longer needs to follow European law on protecting wildlife. All of our wildlife is at risk. It means the whole of Britain is suddenly opened up to the corporation, regardless of the wildlife that's living on those lands. And, you know, most human beings are aware that we do need to live in harmony with nature, that we need to show some respect to the natural wildlife of our nation, and to make room and space and have special protected areas where these creatures are breeding, because they have a right to be on our land, okay? And these laws that are there to protect, you know, they are being gradually whittled away. And to use science falsely in the case of badgers, as you know, it's explained very clearly, you don't get a top veterinary surgeon saying, I'm sorry, DEFRA's lying to the BBC, unless he's got really serious evidence to support that. And you know, some of the things, you know, some of the decisions they maintain are farcical. In Dorset, for example, Natural England assumed that overwintering hen harriers and merlins use only one of all the sites that have been designated of their protection and never stray from it. It makes the same assumption about Bewick's swans that winter around the Severn estuary. That birds fly, enabling them to move from one site to another, appears to have been overlooked. A part of the problem, the claimants argue, is that staff with specialist knowledge have been prevented from making decisions. What? I mean, what's the point of having people with specialist knowledge if they can't make the decisions when it comes to operating, acting on the specialist knowledge? The location of the badger cull zones is such a closely guarded secret that Natural England's local staff are not allowed to see the boundaries. As a result, they can make no meaningful assessment of what the impact might be. Instead, the decisions are made in distant offices by people who have not visited the sites. I wanted to ask Natural England about this, but its external communications have been shut down by the government. I mean, what is this? Natural England, it is a public body. It's publicly funded, but the public has no access to it. And I've noticed this is increasingly happening with public bodies that are accountable to the public because they are publicly funded. And you know, you try to get in touch with these organisations and you can't. You've got to do it through your MP. Any questions now have to be addressed to Michael Gove's Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. DEFRA told me staff carrying out this work will have all the necessary information. It would be inappropriate to comment on an ongoing legal matter. Pardon? So they make it a legal issue, and then suddenly nobody's allowed to comment because now it's a legal issue, when it is an issue of rights. And so that's basically telling us that we are not allowed to comment on the issue of animal rights. And who else is going to comment on the issue of animal rights except human beings? Because let's face it, a badger cannot complain to DEFRA, can they? A badger cannot complain to government ministers. So the human beings, as part of our rights, do have a right to speak up in defence of defenceless animals. But according to the way that they've wangled these corporate laws into British society now, It means that no, we don't have a right to speak out for animals. So, like I say, we're back to that question, aren't we? How can an animal then access their rights if those rights are there? They've been placed there by human beings, so therefore human beings have a duty to stand up and speak out for those animals' rights. And it is the disgusting general treatment of animals in this world that persuaded people like myself 26 years ago to become vegan. Because, you know, for myself, like for example, I looked at the milk industry and was horrified. I was horrified. It's just, it's so cruel what goes on. I mean, they just treat these animals, well, the Tories believe they're not sentient beings. Animals are not sentient beings. That was part of one of the things they put in the Brexit deal, to remove all animal rights for farm animals. Apparently they can feel no pain. The cows don't cry when their calves are removed, apparently. They've got no emotional attachment to their calves whatsoever. And then we find out that, well, actually, the milk industry is also more important than our badgers. So, not only are cows and calves suffering in order to give people milk, which actually we can get perfectly from other sources like soya or rice milk or oat milk or almond milk, but for some reason, well, the whole nation is addicted to this cow's milk, which they're fed from birth, a lot of people. And it's like, so therefore we should just accept as well that we're going to lose our badger populations because there are no proper restrictions in place. We've got sadistic people who enjoy nothing more than getting their dogs, going rambling through the countryside, digging up badger sets and killing them. That's what they enjoy. That's their pleasure. We know that there's an animal abuse culture in Britain that goes to the very highest echelons of our society, in which they sadistically enjoy torturing animals, because it is torture to a fox to chase it through fields with a pack of hounds and finally for the fox to be torn to shreds by those hounds. It is absolutely sickening. And they include children in such activities and are known to blood the child's face on the first kill. It's this is a tradition. It is a tradition of the higher echelons of British society to enjoy murdering our wildlife for nothing more than their own pleasure. Okay? That's the main gist of it, is for their pleasure, their fun, using their guns, rambling through the countryside with their dogs, digging up badger sets. This is what is going on, and it's all been justified by this actually false conclusion that badgers spread TB to cows. So, all right, if the badgers have got TB, then so how come the badgers aren't dying of TB? It it really doesn't make any sense. Are they? Do they just carry it? I think that's what's being implied. Build roads across sites that are supposed to be set aside for wildlife. This is what it is about. It's about corporate development, corporate profits. They've got to keep it going. It isn't enough for a nation to have a set of roads and maintain those roads and maybe add new roads as and when needed. Okay? But no, there's got to be a constant development, building. All the time, in every city centre you'll see it. They're always building something. New offices. Offices in every city. There's huge buildings of offices, and you look at who's actually occupying them offices and find that the vast majority of those offices are empty. They're empty. They spend billions. Build, demolish, demolish, demolish. Oh, but certain buildings in the wealthier, more privileged areas of Britain, oh, they get to keep all their little ancient buildings, don't they? But the big cities around Britain today, you could go to any one of them and it's the same architecture, the same kind of road systems. We're becoming a corporate nation, and it is all about future profits for the corporation. So badger sets scattered all over Britain's rural areas that are protected, well, that's going to be a problem, isn't it? It's going to be, oh no, sorry, you can't build a road through there. There's 3 badger sets. Oh, there happens to be cattle grazing around those lands at the moment. Look, I've got this mate, he's a scientist. He's saying that, these badgers are causing TB in cattle. I think that we need to cull the badger population because it's spreading TB in cattle. Oh, right, so that's it. Badger set's gone. Road, yeah, go ahead. And really, we need to investigate how many areas where badgers have been culled have then later been developed by private corporations for building or making roads. Because this is a serious issue that our badgers are being murdered. Because let's face it, they're being murdered. You say, oh, they're killed. But it is murder, isn't it? Just to go and kill a creature for no other reason than fun, because obviously they enjoy doing it. They're not doing it, oh, I really don't want to do this, but it's so necessary. And they've made this what actually is a ridiculous excuse. And it hasn't even worked because the areas where the badgers have been culled, bovine TB has risen, as is explained here. I think it is time for the people of Britain. If you look through my videos, some of them I'm a bit passionate, some of them I'm a lot calmer, and I just share information. But no matter what issue I'm covering, what is very, very clear in what I'm trying to wake people up to is the corporatisation of our nation, and the idea that Brexit is going to give us any independence whatsoever is literally a fantasy. It is a total pipe dream within the present framework of the stealth takeover of every nation by the global corporation that will impose and is imposing a form of corporate communism onto the people and forcing us to live under their rules, which become a law that we have to live by the minute we enter a workplace, or as to whether or not a creature can live safely in its natural habitat, all coming under corporate rules according to corporate legislation that's written out and endorsed by corporate government, MPs and a Prime Minister that's directly in the pay of these corporations. And even some of them have vested private interests in these corporations. Even councillors are being found to have their own personal investments in the corporations that are suddenly, taking over our public services that are paid for by the council, should have been run by the council, providing jobs to people. But no, the jobs get slashed the moment that service is handed over to a private corporation. Oh, and the corporation gets subsidies and huge tax breaks. And most of them not even based in Britain. We've got one bus company, really, mainline, running most of Britain's buses suddenly, not individual councils. And the services have been cut right down. Actually, in real terms, the drivers' wages have barely increased. They're on actually very, very low wages when you look at, even though the government's saying, oh, inflation's low. No, it isn't. That's an absolute lie. In real terms, inflation is extremely high. The amount of people are paying for rents now, the amount they're paying for domestic bills, even for food, clothing, everything has risen massively since this so-called recession. And wages have not risen in accordance with that. So, you know, these global corporations, it is like, say, you go into a workplace, suddenly you're under that global corporation's rules. Your human rights have been thrown out of the window. No, you are not allowed to get up and go to the loo. These are the rules that are being implied on workers. No, you can't get up and get yourself a drink. You're going to have to wait till you break. No, you're not actually entitled to a break. You're a 0-hour contract worker. You're not entitled to breaks. And actually, lunch hour, you won't get paid for that. We don't cover your lunch hour. It is so disgusting. It is really, really disgusting that a corporation can in the 21st century, after everything that we fought for in terms of our workers' rights, human rights, everything, that these corporations to this very day can still use human beings to do work for them, to labour for them, to make huge profits on the strength of that labour and time and energy, and give them only a very tiny percentage of the profits that they make are paid to the actual workers, the people that produce these profits. And even they don't need to take into account that, look, these people are not robots. They need a drink sometimes, they need to go to the loo sometimes, they need to have lunch during their work day, they get pregnant, they need maternity leave. No, no. They get sick, they become elderly and need to retire and need a pension. No, 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 no. We're going to treat them as if they're robots. We're going to get an agency, which is really, let's face it, the agency that are everywhere now. If you want a job, invariably you're going to be connected to an agency. They'll find you a job. They'll take their cut of your wage off the whatever corporation is using that agency. They'll handle you. They'll tell you when you needed to go into work and when you're not needed. Okay, so these agencies are like the van that rolls up at a corner at a yard and there's a group of guys there, all unemployed, desperate for work, to earn money to eat, to feed the family. And the corporation go, oh, I'll have you, and you. Take them off, they work that day, get paid. Yeah, you're back in the yard the next day. There's no security. There's no security. Within a couple of months, a family can be living on a wage and have a home and their basic needs, and suddenly one parent's lost their job, bang, home's gone, relationships break down, children, even they're taking children off the parents. Oh, you're homeless, you've got nowhere to live. It is. There is no independence. This is the thing, you see, and this is what the whole distraction of Brexit is there is no independence. I would be happy to be independent from Europe and be self-sufficient if still we were going to remain human beings, if we were still going to look after our environment, if we were still going to support and uphold human rights, if the corporations were not given power to do whatever they like, if we didn't have such a corrupt, lying, actually criminal government. I mean, I made a video about the Tories. Well, not when I say Tories, it isn't aimed at all Tories, but at the Tory leadership. Lock them up. They really do deserve to be locked up for what they have done to this country, for the horror that they've inflicted on people through their economic policy, which is economic terrorism. Of course, it's economic terrorism that suddenly people are all their human rights are removed because they're a job seeker. And oh, you're 5 minutes late to sign on. We don't think you've been looking hard enough for work. Right, sanction, no money for you for 3 months. Go away. He's begging on the street. Next minute is arrested for harassment and chucked in jail or fined. Fined. How is the person going to pay the fine? Why have they been left begging on the street? Because those are the corporate rules. This is corporate law, isn't it? That we are expected to live by corporate law suddenly. That appears to just override human rights. So, yeah, that's all right. Yeah, we aren't going to give you your lawful entitlement. We stand in the way between you and your lawful entitlement. And we earn our profits by denying you your lawful entitlement. That's what it's all about. Why? Why would any country give its benefits service, its NHS, the running of our local social services to global corporations to make a profit from? And how are they going to make a profit if they're not going to cut jobs, to slash them and slash wages and slash workers' rights? And then everybody's complaining about immigrants. But it isn't immigrants that have robbed British people of our jobs. It is the implementation of these global corporations that have taken over providing all our services. And that do look with greedy eyes into the future, onto our countryside, and are making preparation now for removing the badger sets that would have stopped their plans for development, so-called development. Because really, we need another kind of development right now, don't we? We need to start developing our humanity. Because the way things are going at the moment, we really are all expected to return to the consciousness of Victorian Britain. You know, just blindly accept that, oh yeah, we're going through austerity. Blindly ignore the fact that austerity amounts to economic terrorism. Blindly ignore the actual facts about this badger cull. Blindly ignore what's happening. Just keep on following the party lines, the ruling party lines that we know are serving global corporate interests. So, you know, Brexit, far from delivering Britain into a state of independence, has actually drastically threatened our sovereignty. Because the reality is that within the European Union, Britain had more ability to be able to live as an independent sovereign nation than we ever will under total dominance of these global corporations and their unlawful rules that they set on the workforce, that they wangle into legislation to destroy our wildlife. These are very, very, very serious things, and that's why I appeal to the people who supported Brexit. You know, I empathise with some of the reasons, but I think we do need to get some balance here. We need to get some balance, and sometimes, you know, when you've got a choice, which we didn't ask for, a choice that was suddenly foisted on us by David Cameron. It's like, well, do you jump out of the frying pan into the fire? And actually, were we in the frying pan when it comes right down to it? I mean, according to a lot of Brexit voters, the frying pan was this massive influx of immigrants every year that was robbing us of our jobs and destroying our culture. Well, part of British culture was having social security, is having an NHS, is having council run, government run services, is having publicly owned buildings and lands and bodies. That we as a nation ran our own affairs and provided for ourselves. That's part of British culture. Well, that's going. It's gone. But Europe protected those aspects of British culture. It protects human rights. It protects environmental rights. It protects workers' rights. So who is destroying our culture? Are these global corporations, the profiteers? That's all they see. They've got pound signs for eyes. That's it. They are eyes, greedy, greedy eyes, eyeing up. Where can we make a profit? Where can we exploit? Let us run your benefit services, government. We'll do a far better job than your government employed agencies. Except they're not. It's cost actually billions and billions and billions to privatise these. It's cost billions to the NHS of what has been done to the people who've been abused by ATOS, for example. It's cost us our wildlife, and you know, we do need to stand up. We need to speak out. We need to refuse to accept this corporate takeover of Britain, and I do believe that there should be another referendum about whether or not we stay or leave the EU. I feel that very strongly there should be another referendum, because it was just foisted on us. People were not informed about the consequences. There was no real debate on the issue apart from immigrants and xenophobia, and the future looks bleak for us as human beings and sovereign citizens of Britain, and it looks even bleaker for our wildlife. So a really huge thanks for taking time to listen. I just hope that my voice is heard, that the other people who are sharing the same concerns, their voice are heard. Look through my subscriptions. We are, as a global consciousness, facing attack right now, and I think it's when we stand up in unity to protect the most vulnerable, you know, the sick, the disabled, the children, the native creatures. That's where we find our strength from. That's where we find our courage and strength. When we can stand up for the rights of others, that is when we also receive our own rights as well. Our own rights are strengthened, and I think it's important that we do make this issue of the badger cull a very, very important issue, and we take steps now to protect badgers, to protect the wildlife of our nation, to make sure that Britain is not going to abandon human rights, animal rights, environmental rights, because that isn't a Britain that surely Brexit voters didn't want to deliver that Britain, that kind of Britain. Surely Brexit voters did not vote in order that our wildlife would have no protection, that we'd have no human rights, no workers' rights. Is that what the Brexit voter was voting for? Because the way that it is going, in reality, that's what it's going to amount to. So, anyway, love and God bless to everybody.